Taylor.
What's up, man? Great to be here.
All right, we're going to give everybody just 1 second. We know that people are scrambling at the end of the day, and we are excited to talk with all who are going to be on here.
Fun fact, we walked down the aisle after we said, "I do," to this song. And it always brings me back to that very moment when we were like, we're married.
Sigala, easy love. All right, I'm going to get some water.
Can you get me some, James? How's everyone doing? Comment in the chat. Are you guys having a good Wednesday? Good week so far? Let me just add a couple people are joining in. Jerry! So fun. Okay, as soon as James gets back, we're gonna get started. Okay, here we go.
All right, rock and roll.
We're gonna get started.
Hey, everybody. Well,
are all the lines muted?
Let's just
make sure.
I think all the lines
All
are muted. If your line's not muted, if you would do us a favor and mute your line. We know that there are probably going to be a lot of people coming in continuously as people are getting done with their days or finishing up other calls. Everybody lives on Zoom nowadays, so we are excited just to share as we've expressed on our Instagram and get rolling with marriage.
So we just want to say thanks so much for joining this call. Today was a very challenging day for both of us. So we're really excided to be on this call tonight.
That's what you were doing this whole time?
Yeah. Comment in the chats if you felt like there was opportunity for you to overcome either conflict or stress in your life today. We definitely felt, I don't know if I would use the word attacked, but
it was just challenging.
It was just a lot.
So anyways,
yeah.
We
even though there's a chat
wanted to just say, like, where did this whole idea stem from? James and I just came back from our 5-year vow renewal. Just last week. We've been married for 5 years, and we had just the most special time in Destin, Florida with some of our dear friends. And after we got married 5 years ago, the very next day I told James, I was like, I'm having a 5-year wedding. And he was like, babe. And I was like, I am. The party planner in me is going to have a 5-year wedding. And so we had this beautiful vow renewal where we shared our original vows and then new vows leading up to, whatever our future is going to look like. And so we were on our way home and we were just processing how incredible the whole weekend was. And I said to James, as we were talking in the way home, I said, hey, let's do a marriage call. Let's talk to other married couples, because we've grown so much in the last 5 years with our communication and overcoming conflict and learning how to press in and to become more like Jesus in marriage. And marriage really is the greatest gift that God could give us. You're on this call, you have a spouse, or you're in a serious relationship or whatever it is. But if you're in marriage, God gave you your person to breathe life and hope into you. Likewise, you can breathe life and hope into your spouse and your partner. And so on our way home, I said, babe, let's just talk about it. So tonight we're going to talk about the 3 C's. So we've got 3 things that we really want to share with you guys tonight and really have a conversation that you can take away from this and maybe implement some of these things in your marriage so that you can, develop deeper connection and intimacy with your spouse. So James,
I'll take it from here and say, first off, there is actual, ploys and attacks to come against you and your marriage. Marriage is a sacred thing. It's a wonderful thing. It is a set apart thing. It's so beautiful and I believe, not elevated and held to the level that it really should be. And we want to help bring it back to that place of excitement, of passion, of, realizing that there's a definite point to it. There is real value in that, because nowadays, people are maybe lacking the reason there. I don't even know why I would get married. Why would I? What's the point? And so there's a million different directions we could go with this, but like Odd said, our primary right now is just to cover a couple of things that, again, we're only speaking from experience here today. Our son is crying in the other room currently. So
pray he goes to sleep right now.
It's continuing on. As all of you guys know, I'm sure you're having your own lives that are carrying a million different variables that are moving. So let's start with the 3 C's. The first C, when it comes to bettering your intimacy, bettering your overall, I believe, quality of relationship, is the word center. And the reason why I feel this is significant is because, one, we are 2 different human beings, right? Whoever you're in relationship with, whoever you are in marriage with, they are different than you. And it's important that we first and foremost acknowledge that, okay? Not to point it out in conflict and be like, you're so different than me. You're nothing like me. How did I get married to you? I'm sure we've had all those conversations, right? We're all, screaming at each other in the heat of emotion, saying things we didn't mean. And so the first thing that really the word center is when it comes to conflict, and when it comes to having disagreements or differing viewpoints, what I've found to be the most impactful thing when it comes to having the waters continuously be smooth in our household, or easing through things that we do not agree on smoothly, is becoming centered. And what I mean by that is taking radical personal responsibility for whatever is going on in your environment or your atmosphere. Because when it comes to conflict, and that's kind of what we're talking about just for, now, because we understand that right now in this world, there is a lot of conflict, and we need to be able to go about that in a loving, efficient, effective way so that we can continue on, in harmony. So when it comes to conflict and being centered, I found that sometimes what I can do, and now most, in 5 years in, we laugh after the fact of having a disagreement, a dynamic discussion, as we call it. We don't say necessarily arguments or fight. We say, we're just in the middle of a dynamic discussion. Okay. We've
been saying that for years. It's been it makes us laugh every time.
It just keeps it fun. Okay. Yeah. So dynamic discussion. So what I found is that on the end of it, I'll look back and say, you know what? I came into that conversation just white hot with either annoyance or frustration or whatever it was, maybe because I was hungry. Maybe I was, maybe I hadn't slept. Maybe I had a really bad workout, or maybe somebody just cut me off on my way home, or, some total external thing took place, and I brought it into the relationship, and I brought it into the conversation at hand. So when it comes to first starting, any sort of conversation, whether it's, hey, I need to share something with you that feels very vulnerable, or, hey, I would like to kind of bring something to light that I feel is important to maybe share with you that maybe you don't realize you're doing, or how you're interacting with me or whatnot. It's so important that we center ourselves first, because the number one thing when to get off on the wrong foot is to project onto other people. And that's just that will never end well. Whenever I, tell her, you made me feel a certain way, or, whatnot, it's out of line. And so
I can't make you feel,
because she can't make me feel anyway. When you hear people say, oh, you made me feel rejected, or you made me feel annoyed, or you made me whatever, it's just inaccurate statement. And we find that too many people use that phrase instead of taking radical responsibility, personal responsibility, saying, hey, I'm really frustrated right now. I am really frustrated, or, maybe a little bit discouraged right now because I don't feel understood. And I do not feel like we are communicating in the same way, or we're just trying to say something completely opposite. That's a very much so responsible ownership standpoint versus you fix yourself, you get it, straight. So centered and becoming centered first going into the conversation is being aware of, what am I bringing into this conversation with me? Does that make sense?
Well, and here's another thing that's really powerful about centering yourself first. So one of my favorite verses that that really help me in becoming the wife that I want to be to James is a soft answer turns away wrath in Proverbs. Now, when it comes to greater and deeper connection with your spouse, being tender and carrying the fruit of the Spirit is what's going to open up the door for a beautiful, life-giving conversation, for greater connection, for intimacy, for being understood. And so when centering myself before I go into a conversation with James, I like to take a step back and evaluate my own thoughts first. That I know that, number one, that I'm bringing joy and patience and kindness, self-control into the conversation. I know that when James and I, especially in the beginning of our marriage, when we were figuring out how we were going to communicate, if we ever came into a conversation not being centered, we came in with our own frustrations. We came in pointing blame at each other. What happened was number one, we didn't get any closer to each other at all. We didn't grow in that connection.
Opposite
we
magnets.
went into the opposite. Yeah, we were like going in the opposite direction. But centering yourself really means dying to yourself. It's becoming more like Christ so that when you come into a situation, you're soft and you're gentle. I know that I can receive almost any type of beautiful criticism in a great way to become better if somebody comes to me gently and kindly, lovingly, opening up and saying, hey, I love you enough to share with you what's going on in my heart. What that does is it literally takes every, defense mechanism out, and it softens my heart to receive. Likewise, if I'm coming to James and I'm saying, hey, I love you so much, but like this is how I want to move deeper in our intimacy and our growth. And this is how I feel. James is way, way, way more open to a conversation than me coming in there being like, I am so infuriated. We need to talk. He'll be like, whoa.
Doesn't end well for me.
Where
Usually I'll leave
coming?
the house or, I'll just come out.
So centering really and becoming more like Christ will allow for you to enter into a conversation first feeling like, oh, I'm becoming more like Christ in this. Therefore, the walls are down with you, and the person, your spouse who you're connecting with, their walls are going to be down too. So taking that radical responsibility of yourself, your emotions, you are in control of your emotions. Your emotions do not control you. And as followers of Christ, we are called to lay our emotions down at the foot of the cross and to take up who Jesus says that we are. And I will tell you what, when we do that and we enter into marriage with our husband or with our wife, we're already softening the ground to create deeper connection and intimacy. So centering yourself first.
Yes. So the second C to tonight is communication. So the first one is center. The second one is communication. Now that's a pretty broad word, and it's broad for a specific reason. We all communicate differently, every single one of us. And this whole journey of a marriage is a refinement process. When you refine anything, whether it's metal, whether it's precious stone, it's caused by friction. In Proverbs, it says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another, right? And so it's not that a perfect marriage, A, even exists, but two, a perfect marriage doesn't mean that there's zero conflict. There should be a rubbing and ebbing and flowing. And so when we first got married, our communication style was very different. Comment in the chats if you and your significant other at the beginning or still now have a different form of communication. You guys just communicate in a different way. When we got started, so background, I am one of 5. I have 4 sisters. And
I have one very dominant brother.
Aud is the youngest of 2, one dominant brother. And so you take those variables, those upbringings, and you realize there is a recipe for different communications, okay? So what it would look like, okay, we'll just paint a picture of what it would look like at the beginning of our relationship. We would have some sort of conflict, okay? Like, I don't know,
Yeah,
like her, like leaving something out or being late somewhere or whatnot. And I would want to talk about it because it would, hurt my feelings. And I would say, hey, that frustrated me. I don't understand why you did that. Why would you behave or respond that way when I've asked you otherwise to do, X, Y, or Z? And I was like, okay, I get it. That makes sense. I'm sorry. Can we be done? Can we move on?
I was like, I get it. I'm sorry. I really am.
And I was
all
like,
right, let's move on.
She was like, okay, yeah, I get it. It's done. And I was like, well, hold on. We haven't even talked about anything yet, first off. And she's like, no. I get it. And I'm like, no. We're not done. Okay. We actually have quite a lot but she was done and she was done. And so what would happen was I would continue to chase. I would continue, guys, this is just me being real. There were several times in the beginning of our relationship where I would follow her around the house, demanding that she talk to me. Let's finish this conversation. Do not walk away from me. And
is not.
If there are any fellas that or women that want to, communicate that I'm not alone in this, that would be awesome. But if I am, that's perfectly fine too. And I would demand to be communicated with. And so when it comes to communication, this is what I want to say. It is so important. We have had, 5 years of conversation of, hey, how do you appreciate me communicating with you? How can I lovingly communicate to you when it comes to things that matter to my heart, things that, mean a lot to me, or maybe that I'm scared to talk about? How can I best communicate that to you? And then listening, not judging what she says and not saying, okay, well, no, I don't like that. I'll communicate with you, but it's not like that. Okay, choose a different way. If you really want to grow in your intimacy and harmony, understanding how your significant other or your spouse appreciates communication from you is vitally important, guys. And most of the time when in the beginning, especially, I would say that and then kind of like plug my ears. Tell me how you want to communicate. And then I'd plug my ears and go, well, I'm going to communicate the way I want to anyways. And it kept getting us in this vicious circle. So when it comes to communication, sometimes it can be hard to link how we feel and what we're thinking to words. That is a skill. That is something that takes, I believe, really doing the first thing, which is centering yourself, taking radical responsibility, slowing your breath physiologically down and your body where you're not running around and so visceral, to connect and say, instead of being like, I'm just mad at you or I'm just annoyed, saying, hey, what you said actually hurt me. And I'm not understanding why you said that, or I feel like maybe I'm not valued based off of what I just did, and this is how I feel. That is something that we have grown in tremendously. Yeah. Me specifically, of continuing on and giving space, and I'll let you share kind of what your communication is. Here's
the beauty of communicating with your spouse. Like, the beauty of it is listening to understand the heart of your spouse. As a wife, it blesses me more than anything when I'm sharing my heart that James is listening to understand my heart more, not to prove a point, not to be right. There's no such thing in communication with your spouse of being right and staking your claim of saying, no, I am right and you are wrong. No, going into the communication and saying, I want to listen to your heart to understand, because the final product of communicating in your day-to-day life, communicating through conflict, communicating when it comes to your children, or when it comes to your desires, or when it comes to your business, or when it comes to your dreams, is that the final outcome would be greater connection, greater harmony, greater unity, greater vulnerability, greater connection, greater intimacy. And in order to do that, it's listening to understand each other's hearts. It's asking questions. In the very beginning of our marriage, and it's taken me a lot of time and energy and conscientious effort to really understand James's heart even greater. But when James would begin to share his heart with me, I was so quick to interrupt him, and to say, well, this is what I actually meant. But. And he wasn't even, he didn't even have the space to open up and to share his heart fully, because I was constantly interjecting him, constantly trying to show him that that's not what I meant, that this is really what I meant, constantly stopping his train of thought. Well, what that did was that shut him down, that didn't create a safe space. I, as his wife, want to be his greatest cheerleader. I want him, as women, men desire to feel honored and respected. And as men, we as women desire so deeply to feel love, to feel like we are heard, to feel like we are seen. And in order for that to happen, in order for us to feel that way, we need to create this space that we're here to listen and to ask greater questions, to not cut somebody off in the middle of their sentence, but to ask and to allow them this train of thought to keep flowing. I am a very verbal processor. And if James were to cut me off every time I begin to open up my heart, I wouldn't have the space to open it up. So when you are communicating with your spouse, know that the final ending is to have that deeper intimacy, that greater connection, that harmony within your marriage. And to have that, it means that we're listening to understand one another, to understand each other's hearts greater. I've always said from the beginning, I love marriage so deeply because it's such a sanctification, a refinement. And we should be in the space where our spouses feel so seen and so heard and so valued. And because this is a forever thing, we are going to make mistakes. We are going to cut each other off, but let's be the spouses on this call that are quick to adjust and pivot, that are quick to say, I'm so sorry. I still do this. I still do this. Even last night when we were talking with one another and James made a comment, I said, babe, that kind of hurt my feelings just then. And he said, well, talk to me, like what happened? And I was able to open up and to share with him. And he responded so kindly and so lovingly to where the end of that, we went to bed last night and I've never felt closer to James.
Well, and 4.5 years ago, I would have been like, okay, well, I didn't mean it. So, whatever, right? That's the response. That's the remark I just would have shot back. And here's the thing, your person so well that your tongue can be dangerously sharp with them, right? You know the words that are going to cut them deep. You know their insecurities. You know what they hold very, very close, and we can weaponize that. And it's so sad. It's so heartbreaking, I think, to the father when we do that. And one of my greatest mentors said, you can either be right or you can be in connection, but you can't be both. And so if you're going into a conversation, like she said, and you're trying to be right, you won't be in connection because your goal is to be right. And if you want to be right, there's been plenty of times where I've been right and I leave the house fuming, but guess what? I was right, haha, and I leave, and I'm just my whole rest of the day is out of whack because I'm not in connection and I'm out of line with my person. And so you can either be right or you can be in connection. And here's the thing as men, what I want to ask all of us, but the men specifically, is how can you create a space of safety and love in your household? How can you be a facilitator, a cultivator of space where your wife can come to you, or your husband, for all the wives on the line, can come to you and feel so safe to share their most, their most sacred thing, or the thing that maybe they haven't had the courage to share with anybody yet, and they know that you will be loved and heard. How can you create that space? And it was so cool last night when we had that. And there was a couple of exchanges last night where we went to bed, and even when we woke up today, and we were like, it's unbelievable to see how different last night went versus how we both know it would have gone, because we were tired. The day had already worn us out, and for us, if we are tired or hungry, those two are pretty big for us, and we can just get jarred and start tail spinning. And we laugh because that's everybody can kind of relate to that, but it's true. And you need to be aware of these things. We all need to be aware of these things. So that if you're like, hey, I haven't eaten in 6 hours, that's why I'm biting your head off right now. It's like, hey, have a banana, Jared. Eat a banana and let's talk in 10 minutes. Get your blood sugar up. So these are things, you guys, that make or break. And when left unattended, and we're going to get into something, here next that is really important. But if these things go left unattended, they really start to wreak havoc. They really do. And so no matter if you've been married for a week, a month, a year, 10 years, 20 years, we by no means have it all figured out, but we do have an immense passion for this. We have a real passion for marriage and keeping the unity so sacred and so firm with your person.
Well, and then the last thing before we enter into the last C that I want to share is, one of the things that James has been so kind with me in is that when I present to him how I'm feeling, he does not get offended with me. He listens to my heart and he takes radical responsibility, and vice versa. Now, it was not always like that. I took great, like big offense in the first year of our marriage, like basically everything he wanted to come to me with. And then I realized that if we as people, if we can invite the people who are closest to us and who love us the most to speak into our life so that we can become better, no matter what that is, we will become stronger in our marriage and a greater light in this world. We need to be a people who are humble enough when our spouses come to us that we receive their constructive feedback in our lives so that we can be a greater and a stronger husband, so that he can be a greater leader in the household, and so that I can be a more beautiful wife in every sense of the word. So coming and communicating from the sense of like, I'm communicating because I love you so deeply, not because I'm pointing a finger. I want to receive from you because I want to become better, not because I'm offended. And so
the last thing, and this is very, very, very important, probably the biggest thing that we've seen in our marriage and many other people's relationships is conclude. And how that ties in is these conflicts take place, these disagreements take place. And what happens more often than not, I believe, is that maybe not everything is said that was needed to be said in that time for that specific circumstance, the context of the conversation. And a couple days, maybe a couple weeks go by. And what happens? During another heated moment or whatnot, I or somebody will bring up the topic at hand from a week ago and throw it back in the person's face and say, well, you remember last week? Huh? You doing that again? And they'll bring it back and they'll use it again. They'll weaponize it. They'll weaponize something that was done. Forgiveness was made. Hopefully, maybe not. And it's thrown back in the person's face. So when we say conclude, it means that when you are having that intimate exchange of, hey, this is how this feels. And I love how Sharia said earlier, repeating back what was said to you, what the other person said, how they feel, so that you better, are articulating and understanding how they are feeling, is a powerful exercise. But once that is all done and everything is said, it is done. I think one of the biggest, one of the biggest mistakes for any relationship, especially any marriage, is when people give life to dead bones that have been buried and that have been done away with. And the temptation is real. We want to. It's a rock that we feel we can just pick up and hurl back in their face because they messed up yesterday or a week ago. And maybe we're in the wrong right now. But let me tell you something. It is detrimental when you do that. And so when you conclude, and these are boundaries, okay? So we have rules of engagement in our marriage where there are things that you can and cannot do, rules of play. And I think that's important. And we can get onto that, in another call and discuss kind of what we've done and fabricated around that. But we have rules of engagement. And so if we're having conflict or whatnot, and I bring up something from the past, and I bring up something that we have already put to rest and already come to forgiveness and agreement on, and I bring it to the table and start throwing it at her, she will go, James, that is out of bounds. You cannot say that. That is against the rules. And we honor that. And I'll say, okay, I'm sorry. I did not, I'm sorry. And there's immediate repentance there. And it took us a long time to learn that, and express that in the heat of the moment. We've known that since the beginning, but practicing that has made a tremendous difference in how things continue on in our life.
Well, and really just like listening to that and hearing that, I think that that's one of the most beautiful things that we've really, really grown in over the last 5 years. I mean, when I think of Jesus, who is my lover and my best friend, he literally doesn't remember what we did yesterday. He doesn't remember. And if our whole goal in this life is to become more like him, the greatest gift that God gave us in and through his son is our spouse. He is Jesus in the flesh to me on earth. And when I say, I forgive you, it is finished, and Jesus doesn't remember yesterday, we don't remember yesterday. Because let me tell you what, when you continue, and we are continuing to be a people that look forward, look towards the future. We don't look in the past. I am not who I was even a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, 2 years ago. When we first got married, I am different. I am becoming new every single day. And do you know what? When we don't bring the past into the present or the future, and we let the past die, do you know what that creates for our present and our future? It creates the fruit of the Spirit to literally manifest in our atmosphere. It brings joy. It brings patience. It brings kindness. It brings self-control. It allows for intimacy, deep intimacy. If I feared that James would continue to bring up things that I did even a week ago, then do you know what would happen? My mouth would not open to share the deep things of my heart with him, because it would never be a safe space for me. And when you are in a covenant relationship with your spouse, my greatest mandate on my life is to be the woman that God called me to be for my husband, that he would never fear that I would ever utter out of my mouth anything negative or demeaning towards him, that I would honor him and respect him like the gift that he is to me, and vice versa with him. So let's be a couple and a spouse on this call of people who are really, I mean, if you're taking time on your Wednesday night to be in this call and on this call, then let it be done and move forward with the heart and the vision of creating the atmosphere in your home that when it is finished, it is done. You tie a bow on it and you move forward with greater connection, harmony, and love. Because I'll tell you what, never when we're finished with the conversation are things brought up again in our marriage. And it allows for both of us to feel so heard and so seen and so valued, to where I never have fear of bringing anything to my spouse. I never have fear bringing anything to him, because I know that he's going to respond to me in love.
Well, it's a continued work in process. Okay. I do my absolute best. But I
don't feel like you ever bring up the past. I feel like we did at one point, but we don't do that anymore.
And I'll say, no, we don't do that anymore. And one thing that I was guilty of that I'll say is there would be things during the conflict or whatever, where we were voicing how we were feeling, that I would harbor. I wouldn't voice it. I wouldn't voice maybe how really frustrated I was. I wouldn't voice fully how what she said hurt me, or the actions that, that she did that affected me. And I would just say, yeah, it's okay. It's fine. It's good. And I would have a little bit still of unresolved tension and, even maybe resentment. But here's the thing, that was on me, because in that space, I chose not to voice things that were actually bothering me. And again, that goes back to number one of taking responsibility, getting centered. And when these things go unaddressed, I'll say it one more time. When these things, these topics, you guys, this is life. This is really living. This is really being in relationship. There are so many people who are just living surface level marriages and surface level lives, cohabiting with other, with their spouse. And they're not truly engaging. This is the richness of life. This is where so much joy and love can be found, is in these exchanges, because you're not alone. And that's the powerful part about this, is when you realize I'm not the only one that maybe felt a little bit scared to have this conversation. Or, you know what, when you get to be the recipient of grace and forgiveness, it only makes you want to give grace and forgiveness that much more. And so, in tying a bow on all of this, that is our heart for this, and whatever continued things we continue to bring, is that this would allow us not just to become more focused on each other, but more focused on God and how he created marriage to be. This was his design. Marriage was not invented by humans whatsoever. We did not come up with this concept. This is a supernatural, heavenly, deeply spiritual thing. And anybody that tells you otherwise is flat out wrong. This is a God-designed relationship, and it should be treated as such. And so the last thing we want to, I guess, leave everybody with is just a little call to action, a little activity, a little something for you guys to engage afterwards. Do you want to talk about that, or do you have anything else you want to say?
No, I just want to, no, you do the call to action. And then
okay, so really what we want from this, and what our heart, as we were praying over this and talking about this, is we want there to be more engagement and more communication between you and your spouse or significant other. And so applying what we've talked about tonight, what we would encourage and challenge and charge all of you with is to look and observe the things that you took away from this call, and the things that you observed maybe and took away regarding yourself. Maybe some areas that were have prohibited deeper connection, deeper intimacy, deeper relatability with your spouse. And then to share those things that you've observed about yourself, because on these, when it comes to marriage and topics of marriage, what we want to do is like, oh man, my wife needs to hear this point. This is a great point. I hope she's paying attention right now. Geez, are you hearing this right now, babe? This is crazy. This is for you. He's talking to you right now. That's what we want to do. So getting off this call and saying, you know what? I really felt like I've maybe been a little scared to communicate everything, or to share everything about how I feel. Or maybe I realize about myself that I just come on way too strong when I get emotional. And that's maybe because I feel insecure, and I feel insecure about X, Y, and Z. And having there be a safe, sacred space just right here and now. We get that there's a million things going on in your day and week. We're in the middle of the week. So, things are full on right now. But what if after tonight and after this call, you spend the next 10, 15, 20 minutes to just reflect with each other? And one of the great exercises we do is when we share stuff like that, we don't judge thoughts. We don't judge and project and say, well, why the heck are you feeling that way? We just observe. And so if you're the one that's listening, just observe. Don't interject. If your opinion is not asked for, then don't give it. Just sit and listen, and ask maybe some follow-up questions that would pull more out in your spouse. That is what we want to encourage you all to do, getting off of this call for the next 15, 20 minutes if you have the time.
And then finally, the last thing that I just want to share is your spouse is the greatest gift that God could give you. Mm-hmm. They're the greatest gift. They are worth everything. You guys will be able to do more together than you would ever be able to do apart. And we remind ourselves of that every single day. When James and I are connected, we can do more. We can be more. We can be more like God when we are connected together, pursuing one another than we could ever be apart. And so thank you so much for just tuning in. We don't know if what the future holds. Maybe we'll do this again, but we also did want to share our email addresses. If you guys have anything specific that you want to ask or talk about, we'll share our email address, and feel free to connect with us. We'd love to do a marriage Zoom with you, or maybe we'll continue to do these, but thank you for being on this line, and we'll see you guys.
Yeah, and if there's anything, these emails are, obviously direct lines to us, and we understand that maybe there's some things that are maybe more sensitive, or things that you don't know how to go about. And again, not that we have the answers for everything, but we don't want marriage to be a lonely space for anyone. And if you have something you want to talk about, if you want to jump on one-on-one Zoom calls to talk about, Jesus, the Spirit, marriage, how to do this, how to do that within marriage, we would absolutely love just to be a sounding board, to answer questions and to help you feel supported and encouraged along this journey. So thank you guys for coming and being a part of this. This has been such a blast, and we hope to do more. And we're grateful for your time.
Yeah. So guys, have a great rest of your night. Bye, everyone.
See you guys.
Love you.